Hello and welcome to Enhance Ephemeral Gaming. Today we're going to be wasting no time and jump straight into 8 quick tips to help new and maybe even experienced players improve at Superfuse. Tip number 1. This tip is to spend time understanding your stats and how your class is going to be using them. The game doesn't really go out of its way to explain these things to you, but everyone should spend some time in your character sheet and read what each stat actually does. I'm going to go over a few of the most common issues and things that result in poor or inefficient gearing. The first thing we're going to notice here is accuracy. I'm going to have that pulled up on my character sheet. This affects only non-spell-based skills, and it compares a character's accuracy versus their target's evasion to determine the chance needed to hit. This is then set as a percentage, with the disparity being between your chance to hit and the opponent's evasion, which increases that chance. Now, the issue is if you're an elementalist or a spell-based version of another class, accuracy just isn't really relevant to your character. If you're out of mana, you should spend an energy refill or change your fusion so that you can maintain that ability and keep casting. Now, there's also strength, reflexes, and power. You'll frequently see equipment with these statistics, and they will often have or show less stats added. However, each point of these stats counts as a point in 2 categories, effectively making them 2 stats for the price of 1. For example, strength increases the physical damage and armor by 1 per point of strength gained. Reflexes increases your accuracy and your evasion by 1 per point of reflexes gained. And then power increases all elemental damage by 1 and your energy by 2 for each point of power gained. All right, let's head into tip number 2. In the early game, this tip is to not focus too much on your percent-based increases. It ends up being somewhat basic math, but game after game has taught us that overall percentage increases are better on our upgrades, our gear, and our statistics. Early on in Superfuse, though, the increase you get from a percentage is actually fairly minimal and will most often net out far less than a flat stat on the same type. Now, I can find you an example in my inventory here. The easiest thing to show here is this particular sturdy foam shoulder pads. They give me 8 bonus armor. I have plus 15% added armor on that. Well, that plus 15% added armor actually is only a stat that applies to the base armor of that equipment. So that's why I'm getting a 9.2 armor. Many people read this as giving them 15% overall added armor, and that is just not the case. So the other thing we should look at here is our skills. So let's open up our talent tree and let's see what you can do. In your base mastery skill, you have a specific amount of things. You get 27 power total here, and if I were to increase it, I would go to 30 power. This is an increase of 3 power, as well as a 1% increase in all of my fire spell damage. It also increases my reflexes, which for me will mostly be evasion, though that also increases my accuracy. So if I were to then come over here and say plus 15% fire spell damage, I could gain to plus 20% fire spell damage. So there is a difference between gaining 5% damage on fire spells or gaining 3 power and 1% fire damage. Now let's just go to our equipped skills here. You'll see my main skill has a range between 35 and 83. This has a lot of modifications to it, and so we don't necessarily want to look at it here, but it's important to keep in mind that if I were to increase 35 or 30 by 5%, I would only be getting an increase of about 1.5 damage. If I were to increase this 14 to 21 by an additional 5%, I would actually only be gaining an additional 1 damage in most cases. It's just not a lot. There's not much we really get added here. Now, conversely, if we were to come out and look and see what power actually gives us, power gives us all elemental damage up by 1 and a max energy by 2. So effectively going up in power will increase all of those damages by 3 plus an additional 1%. So we're netting out ahead even at level 14. It just makes more sense for me to go ahead and bump this than it does anything else. All right, let's move on to tip number 3. Tip number 3 is going to just be that your fusions have benefits outside of the fusions themselves. It's not super clear on how these work, so I'd like to show you. Each fusion takes a little bit of your fuse capacity here. So I have some fusions applied to other things, but this is my main skill. So we're going to primarily focus on that. I'm going to add ricochet because I like my fireballs to be able to bounce off of my enemies. As I level up, the damage is going to go up. The energy cost is going to go up based on the effects here. And at times, the attack per second or crit chance or crit damage are going to go up. The primary benefit I'm hoping to show you here is that while it adds skill power, while it adds level to you, and that's going to be up here, it's going to add skill power to your level, and as it does that, your damage and your range will go up dramatically. Now, let's do shatter. That allows my enemies to shatter sometimes and go into projectiles. This is going to give me a 26% fuse activation chance on that, 10 damage per shard, 10 shards spawned, and plus 3 to skill power. So that's going to level me up quite a bit on this level. Let's go ahead and bring it out right around here. We're now at level 4. You see my damage range is 19 to 44, which is pretty significant in the difference. But let's say that I am going to want more damage. We're going to add 2 more skill power, which should level me all the way to level 6 here, or level 5 here. So let's bring that out. That is also going to give me a plus 10% all damage as well. So not only do we go to level 5 and got a base damage increase, we now have a much larger range due to the additional skills. And if you'd like to see even further that it's not just the damaging stuff that brings us up, let's go ahead and do an energy cost reduction. It's going to give me 2 skill power, so that's going to put me to level 6. We'll bring that over. We'll add that fuse in. I'm now at level 6. Level 7 is the max here, but I don't have the level required for level 7. So let's see what would happen. My damage is 36 out of 86. I've got 10 fuse capacity. So let's go ahead and grab an energy restore and miss, which I can afford in my fuse capacity. But I can't technically go to level 7, even though it looks like I can. Let's bring this out, rotate it, and place it. So I've gained 2 skill power from this. However, my damage did not go up, and that is because I can't technically get this next level, and that is what affects the additional damage your skills will do. So you get the effect of the fusion, but in this scenario, it's not actually worth it to me because the energy cost overall goes up, and I don't get a damage increase. So I'll probably bring this out for now and use it on other skills. That was a very brief introduction. I can do a whole topic on how to work through your fusions and how to place things the most effectively so you can fill this grid in. But for now, we're going to move on. All right, tip number 4 is to prioritize equipment with the experience per kill stat early on in the game. Leveling in Superfuse slows down very quickly, and quests, especially the side quests, rarely provide a significant portion of your level in experience rewarded. This combines to mean that most of your experience actually comes from killing monsters spread throughout a map. Because mini fights are large scale with numerous minions, a bonus experience per kill stat makes a huge difference in the time needed to level a character up. Do note that if you're considerably higher in level than the area you're in, I will say this is 2 to 3 levels, you should probably focus solely on the main quest line until that is equal to or greater than your level. Tip number 5 is going to be to use your boosters. They can regenerate your health, your energy, or be split across both. In addition, some generate utility effects such as an increase in your armor or resistances that can be crucial in surviving a fight. In too many games, potions will just stack up in your inventory and you'll tell yourself, I'll use them on the boss, or when the boss comes around, you just don't even remember you need to use them. In Superfuse, you need to throw that mentality away entirely. I've played all 3 classes to level 18 or greater, and especially early on, you'll be using your boosters if you want to keep up a solid pace in growth and gameplay. The game drops them liberally, with at least 1 booster dropped in every fight, so using them as a part of your general rotation is advised. I recommend a basic setup of health, energy, hybrid, and armor boosters for your initial loadout, but for Berserker you could stock 2 hybrid boosters or 2 health boosters in order to use them in rapid succession, or potentially a resistance booster depending on if you're seeing a lot of elemental attack. Tip number 6. Tip number 6 is to ignore the common gear or the white gear drops. Because your inventory space in Superfuse is quite limited and requires organization to effectively manage your storage, you're going to want to ignore the common or white drops outside of boosters. By and large, at the time of this video, there just aren't really any good ways to spend your money. And collecting and selling common gear is going to cost you more time, and in many cases, using up your town portals frequently in order to clean your inventory. All right, let's give a quick example of the sale price on white gear versus more expanded gear. So I'm in one of the shops here, and you can see that I have a two-handed weapon each for a common, rare, epic, and legendary version. Now, the common version sells for 121. Its base sell value is fairly low, and it takes up a ton of inventory space and room. I'm going to go ahead and sell that for 121. Now, you will at least note that you'll never have to identify a common piece of gear. When you come onto the blue side, this is a little bit of a tough one. It will either sell for exactly what you would have sold the lower quality gear for, maybe a tiny bit more but not much, or it's going to have a boosted sell level if it's identified. If you don't think you can use it, don't bother identifying it, just sell it. We then come to the epic versions. This now sells for 404. So you got about a 60% increase on the blue from the white. You get more than double what you get for a epic or a rare piece of gear for epic. We go all the way to legendary here. You double again with this piece of gear, almost going double again what the epic was. So it is important to pick up gear. However, it drops so much common gear that unless you want to be spending town portal stones every 5 minutes, you just want to be selling rare or above. Tip number 7 is to remap your skills. This is especially true if you're not a berserker, but I recommend you place a walk only and a basic weapon attack on your mouse keys, but no big skills. There are a few reasons for this. Right now, Superfuse does a very poor job at automatic pathing and collisions. Your characters are just going to be walking in the direction you click and won't go around any objects or enemies in your way. That means if you're using the clicking method and you're in the middle of a large horde of enemies, you could accidentally be clicking on an enemy that is blocked by another and slightly out of your range. This is going to result in your character doing nothing but attempting to walk in that direction while you just get beaten to death. Also, misclicks can be pretty punishing when you're attempting to cast at range. You can either end up missing a target that moves when you could have predicted its path and fired it off, or you will end up wading into the thick of melee range, which makes it pretty difficult or even impossible to effectively kite your opponents, which often is something you're going to need to do. All right, tip number 8. This is mostly a bonus tip and one I just wanted to illustrate on screen how drastic the effect actually was. The more you have a glass cannon or ranged build, the more you're going to want your character to have a visibility range bonus on its armor. It's crucial in some scenarios, allowing you to skirt around enemies, engage before you're seen, or just to make better decisions as you explore. Let's go ahead and look at the way it affects me on screen now. So you see I have very little equipped right now, and we'll go ahead and start applying my equipment. This equipment adding 42 sight range. Each time you're going to see it blur a little bit less on the edges and get a little brighter. We've got a lot here, and we go from having what effectively was just a dark pool around my character to being able to see way off over here in the corners. This can be a huge boon and keep you alive when you otherwise would have died. Yes, you can maintain that that is partially convenience, but it's a convenience I just choose to have. All right, busy gamers, those are all my quick tips for now. If you're interested in further tips or in-depth breakdowns, there's so much we didn't touch on here today. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know what you'd like to see in the comments below the video. Currently, I do have plans to do a What Classes For You video, as well as a good overview of each class's strengths and their weaknesses. I might even go into a little bit about how I like to build them. Before we go, if you like this content and you want to keep seeing more from me, drop me a like, consider subscribing, as it really helps. As always, if you've made it this far though, thank you so much for sticking with me and enjoy your time gaming.